I'm so excited because today we have Katrina Bos on the podcast. Welcome.
Yay. Thanks for having me. So fun.
I'm so excited. When we had a quick chat a couple of weeks ago now, it doesn't feel that long ago. I just felt like I could have spoken to you. We only had 15 minutes and I felt like then I could have spoken to you for hours and hours. So we'll try and cap it at like 45 minutes today, but let's see. Let me introduce you. So Katrina is the author of 6 books and teaches Tantra and grounded spirituality. Katrina's gift is in her storytelling that brings the listener on an intimate journey to themselves. She shares how we can apply tantric principles to every aspect of our lives, bringing us the intimacy and happiness that we all know is possible. I love it. Love it so much. I actually would love for you to start with, as I was thinking about this today, I was like, I don't know that a lot of people who aren't in the like Tantra community per se know what it means. So I would love to start as basic as like, what is Tantra? Like, what does that mean to you?
Yeah. It's a great question, and it's very hard to answer.
Okay, cool.
Because in many ways, it's a lot. Well, it's a lot like asking what yoga is.
Yeah.
Like we can see what, say, the Western world has done with it, and we can maybe see how it makes our lives better. But it's really hard to know what is it really, right? Because in similar ways, Tantra is also a spiritual path. But what sets Tantra apart from a lot of other things is a lot of paths. Imagine there's our physical life, our how we pay the bills, our fitness, what we eat, relationships, money, all that kind of thing. And then we have a spiritual life that is maybe, I go to church on Sunday, or I burn incense, or I meditate once in a while. But they tend to stay separate. And a lot of people either only live in the physical world and they just literally meditate once a week or something, or they go to church. And other people, they're like, no, I'm on a spiritual path and I don't want to have any of that work stuff or money or relationships or sex. This is just going to distract me from my connection to the divine. So there's sort of this 2 kinds of separate groups. Tantra says, no, this is all meant to be one. We're meant to walk through life with this beautiful connection to oneness, to nature, to God, however you see that, with the wonder that there is there. Like when we have those moments, and we've all had them where all of a sudden time kind of stands still and all the physical stuff disappears and you're like, I really love being here. I don't even know why I love being here, but there's something inside of me that's like, this is great. To actually be able to walk through our physical lives with that presence, right? And so in the West, of course, I'm not exactly sure how it came to the West, but I mean, we all think it started with the singer Sting, right? That he was interviewed and he said, well, my wife and I practice Tantra and sometimes we have sex for 8 hours, which of course leads us to connect the dots that, Tantra is about having sex for 8 hours.
Yeah.
In the same way that a golfer might have said, well, I've started studying Tantra and now my golf swings got better. Yeah. So Tantra is about golf. It's like, no. But what it did do is it illuminated how incredibly broken we are in our relationships and our sexuality. And from years of, religion, oppression, all these kind of things, we got so separated from our sexuality.
Yeah.
It got completely broken. And then on a foundational level, we didn't feel loved. We didn't even feel like we were being human. We felt like we were just sort of dogs having sex or something and just trying to make it more interesting with more toys, more something or whatever. Because we knew that, no, we're more than this. We're able to have more. And all of a sudden, the promise of Tantra comes in and says, aha, there is more. And here's a way to get there. But of course, it's all about shifting us. Right? If we are hyper-focused on our physical lives, then that's how we're going to have sex. We're going to be hyper worried about what we feel like. Am I a good lover? Am I blah, 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 blah. And it's going to stay really small. But as we expand our lives in a tantric way, that we really start to blend all this together, then all of a sudden we look at a partner and we say, oh my God, what a miracle you are. And everything slows down and suddenly you really experience the other person. And all of a sudden your sexual intimacy goes from 10, 15 minutes of whatever to hours of playing with your best friend and hanging out. And all of a sudden magical moments happen. Things happen that you could never have imagined happening. And you're like, I don't even know how we got here. And so this is the wild thing about Tantra, is that as we study it and as we learn about it, we expand as people and everything shifts, and our relationships definitely shift. Like in my book, Tantric Intimacy, I talk in there about raising my children. I talk about living, because you just become more present. You just, it's like my daughter, my kids are 28 and 26 now, but when Tantric Intimacy first came out, I said, would you read it, like just to kind of proof it? And she said, Mom, I can't. I can't be objective about it. I've lived this my whole life, which sounds weird and kinky, right? But it's not. She's like, I don't know any other way of living. So she, and that's what Tantra is. It's actually this beautiful way of living where it's almost like you're always remembering that you really are everything. And you're having this experience. And when things go badly, you dive into it because this is the experience. And when things are awesome, you dive into that because you're so aware that we're all of it. And we're also this awesome little limited version of it. And how cool is that? Right?
I love that so much, because I remember a time when like spirituality became about like positive thinking, and I still hear this language around like keep your vibe high, or like, and there's just no allowance there for like anything negative, and I'm using inverted commas for those who can't see me, anything negative or bad, or like, because it isn't bad or good, but there wasn't any space for that. It didn't allow you to have a full experience of life because you bypassed it to think that if you only thought positive that you were going to get to this magical place, and it's you're missing half of the piece.
Well, exactly. Like, for example, a lot of Tantra comes out of India. And so in the Hindu perspective, they have this idea of Shiva Shakti. And Shiva Shakti is sort of the oneness when they're together. And it's funny because even though we sort of consider Shiva to be the man and Shakti is the woman or the god and the goddess, in actuality, they're completely interchangeable. But when they're together, this is the oneness. This is God, omnipotence, whatever you want to say. And then our creation was when Shakti separated from Shiva, and Shiva remained pure consciousness, and Shakti became us. It became the mountains. Shakti was Shiva manifest. Well, Shakti is the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? This is everythingness manifest. So suddenly, whether we're crying or we're angry or where our life has gone into the toilet for some reason, it's all Shakti. And if you want to experience true oneness and true bliss, you have to experience both Shakti and Shiva. You can't bypass Shakti. Like, you can't bypass any aspect of it, because this is it. There's not an alternate Shakti. Like, we have this idea that, oh, well, yeah, but this world is crazy and I want to get off. And there's just like, everyone's gone, I hate this world. I hate my life. I just want to move to the Himalayas or something. But it's like, but then you'll never experience bliss because you haven't even mastered Shakti yet. Like, you can't have that. And so, yeah, it completely welcomes all experience.
That like polarity you're talking about just reminded me of when we met and you were talking about like the masculine and feminine energies together and that oneness. And I'd love you, because again, a bit like Tantra, there's been the perception of masculine and feminine energies is a bit skewed out there. And I know you write on this a lot. So I would love you to talk to that. Like, what is it? And everything. Tell me everything.
Well, I'm just hearing you going, but in 45 minutes or less.
No, actually less, because I have much more I want to know.
Yeah. So it's funny, when I first heard about masculine and feminine, besides like most of what we think about masculine and feminine are just gender stereotypes, and they're gender stereotypes living in a patriarchy, right? That men are masculine is strong and burly and angry and, tough and all that. And feminine is soft and demure and peacekeeping and always sweet and loving and all that kind of thing. These are just gender stereotypes. They have nothing to do with it. The first time I ever heard about masculine and feminine spoke about differently was in Tantra. Because again, we have this idea of oneness. And in every religion, there's some sense of oneness. And then there is duality. And in duality, we actually get to experience each other. I get to experience a glass of water. I get to experience you. I get to throw a ball. This is duality. We're just, instead of being just oneness all the time, we're actually in two places. How do these two things, any two things, how do they interact? Well, one maybe gives something to another and the other receives it. One maybe protects something when they're hurting. There's all these different ways that two different entities can interact. These are the universal energies of masculine and feminine, beyond gender. So anytime, if I'm the one talking right now, I am in the masculine giving and anyone listening is receiving. And this is the connection. This is the human connection that's happening. So my fascination with this is that my whole life, I've always felt that we had some weird separation from each other. And a lot of religions talk about this, the illusion of separation. But I really mean amongst people. Like even, when I was raising my kids or whatever, and it was almost like there was always this weird separation, especially from people you love the most. Like almost in family, there was the most distance. And I always felt like this isn't right. Like you're supposed to have deep, healthy bonds, not codependence, just healthy bonds. So as the masculine and feminine started to really rise for me, you realize that, well, this is what's wrong. We actually need to redefine the masculine and feminine. So for example, historically, we couldn't do this because women, and I'm just going to use the genders for a minute, women had no rights. They were nothing more than chattel. So you can't actually interact that way without separation because one's in charge of the other. That doesn't work. We see the same dynamic historically where they're parents and children. The parents are in charge of the children. You're never going to have a deep love bond there because, teachers are in charge of students. Governments are in charge of people. This is the separation domination paradigm. So then we fought for our women's rights. And now all of a sudden women became equal in many parts of the world for all intents and purposes. And now all of a sudden everyone's like, I can do everything you can do. And it's like, but if we want to polarize, we actually have to take different energies. It isn't that the feminine does yoga and the masculine does CrossFit. It's not like that. It's actually, one person gives, the other one receives. One person is chaos and wildness and the other person is structure. And you can see this especially in intimate relationships, where if you want to have a dynamic, romantic relationship, the greatest thing you can do is polarize, where there will be one person who would love to embrace the masculine. They want to be the one pursuing. They want to be the one that makes the other person smile. They want to be the person that's initiating and planning things and everything. And the other person, hopefully, wants to be in the feminine. They want to be wooed. They want to be pursued. They want to do all this. And these are completely different energies. And there's no even Steven energy here. It's actually the power of the masculine. They love being masculine, and that it's almost like divine energy flows through them as they're giving, and they become empowered just by being in the masculine. And the feminine energy, when I really love being in the feminine in relationships, what happens is when we receive that energy, it actually asks us to completely relax and almost expand. It's like imagining Mother Earth. And let's say, there she is. And all of a sudden the sun comes out and then maybe a rain comes and she just opens to receive. And this is what happens, especially in intimacy. When the feminine opens like that, it's almost like the room becomes alive. Like there's this palpable, like in the room. And the masculine partner's like, whoa, right? And they're almost like holding on for dear life as they're sort of navigating this. And the more they give, the more the feminine opens, and the more they give, the more the feminine opens. And the stiller and the stronger they are, the wilder the feminine gets to be. And this is where this starts to roll like this crazy energy, and it takes you to crazy places, right? Now, that's just in intimacy, which is super exciting, especially in the land of Tantra and tantric intimacy. But it's only there. Like in the rest of our life, we want to be whole. We want to be equally masculine, feminine all the time. That, if you and I are hanging out, sometimes you'll be in the masculine, sometimes I'll be in the feminine, sometimes I'll be in the feminine, or sometimes I'll be in the masculine, you'll be in the feminine. Like, we just shift with the moment. We don't want to always be, I am always in the masculine, I am always in the feminine. You want to be whole. Like, we want to be our own yin yang symbol all the time. But in intimacy, the polarization is what makes life so exciting. And that's when we start to experience what we know romance is actually made for, what we know that sexual intimacy, what the real depths and heights are actually possible there. And it's such a fun exploration. I'm super passionate about it.
I am stuck on a point that you made earlier, because quite often what I see happening in relationships is that although there's a couple there is the power of the mother and the child, because the person's in charge, and it's quite often the woman being, and the man feels like the child. And so then in my mind, I think is Tantra is that not possible then to have that polarity because of that unevenness of power happening? Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. No, it totally won't ever happen, because the problem is, especially in like a heterosexual relationship like that, like this is an archetype that we fall into that absolutely doesn't work, because that woman that's being thrown into the mother is feminine, or the mother is masculine. Parents are always in the masculine because they're the ones providing, caring for, protecting of children, because the children are in a vulnerable growing state. So in that state where the woman is actually in a mother role and the man is actually in a child role, neither one are empowered. That man, and this isn't the same in same-sex couples, but in this case, the man in his heart wants to be in the masculine. They want to be treated like they're the masculine partner, but they've fallen into a child role. And maybe it's because they needed mothering that they never got as children. Maybe it's just a habit. Maybe the woman did it. Maybe she just mothers everybody, and that's just the way it is. And well, I had 4 kids plus the one I married, and there's sort of this mentality. But so years ago, I used to teach ballroom dance, and a lot of the people who came were women who had dragged their husbands. And I live in a very rural area, so it was mostly dragging husbands there. So a lot of these relationships were exactly what you're saying. The women called the shots, and now realize that these women aren't actually in the masculine role. They're in a controlling mode, right? Control is not masculine. Control is just a power play, because if I'm not in control, nothing's going to happen, or something's going to happen I don't want. This isn't connection either. Masculine is giving, protecting, this is not control. And the men in this case, they were just all very passive. They were just like, you know what? Just do as she says. Life's easier that way. Like, whatever. So I would line them all up, leaders on one side, followers on the other. And regardless of maybe how their dynamic was at home or whatever, I never once in all the years I taught dance thought it felt right for the man who's actually in the passive role in the relationship to be on the follower side, and the controlling woman to be on the masculine side, on the leader side. So they always flipped. Like, it was always the men on one side or the women on the other side. They were always heterosexual couples out here. We weren't that far ahead back then. But it was so interesting to watch the dynamics, because the men were so used to being told what to do, and the women were so used to telling the other ones what to do. They were never happy. They were always bickering. So what happens in a ballroom class or a Latin class is you learn the steps, you do something with your partner, and then you change partners. So what would happen is suddenly these men had to step into the masculine.
Mm.
And the women had to step into the feminine. And then they would dance a little bit. They'd have to move to another person. Then they'd have to move to another person. And all of a sudden, by the time they got back to their original partner, the entire dynamic had shifted. And the men were now in the masculine and the women are now in the feminine. And you should have seen the difference. Like the men were suddenly, no, I got this. It's okay. And the women were like, and then by like about 2 or 3 weeks in, the followers had to close their eyes and let the leaders lead them.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so wild to see the women smile. Like to see them just be able to relax and have this man who they truly love lead them in confidence. Like, and the men were like, yeah, like this is it. And I'm not saying those lessons did anything to their marriage or anything, like maybe they did.
How come we're just going to have to get everyone to do ballroom dancing?
I know. But there's something about it because the reality is if you have the dynamics flipped like that, and the flip is everywhere. I mean, it's in porn where like, I remember even so I was married for 20 years and then I got divorced about 10 years ago and I started dating out in the dating world. And there was a time that I really was into quite younger men because men my age had a lot of baggage. It was just like, I don't know, we'll go for a bit younger. But the number of men who had watched so much porn and actually been raised on porn, you'd sort of fool around and you'd think everything was going okay. And then all of a sudden they would just lay down on their back, put their hands behind their head and wait for you to service them. And I was like, what are you doing? I had no idea. I was like, what? Like, they literally were flipping.
You're like,
the
are we
dynamics
relaxing now? I'll lay down too.
That's what I did. I just like would lay down beside them, like, and then they would say to me things like, are you tired? Like, what's, and I'm like, what is this? Like, I've never seen such, like, because in course for me, I was really conscious that I only wanted masculine partners. Like, I have no interest in driving that boat. Like that's not my exploration, you know? And so to see these men being trained to be receiving in the feminine and to think, this is not going to do you well in life. Like, this is not, you know, so this is another reason I'm so passionate about this because and I'm just going to speak heteronormatively, but for the men to really feel strong and powerful and for women to actually trust. And again, you don't surrender to someone who's not safe. Like, all of this is in connection, right? So you can only be in the masculine to someone who's open to receive, and you can only receive from someone who's giving you something you desire. Right? It all starts with connection, but it's the same in same-sex couples too. Like, I have one friend who he'd had a lot of partners and some worked, some didn't. And when he started studying Tantra with me and he learned about the masculine feminine, he was like, oh my God, suddenly so many of my relationships make sense. Because, for example, if two men get together and they're really aroused by each other, they're really attracted to each other, but both are actually bottoms, you know, one has to flip, right? And eventually, if they have a relationship, they will get resentful because they don't want to. And then there'll be passive aggressiveness and weird stuff happen. But if a natural femme meets a natural masculine, everything flows completely beautifully. And it's so much fun.
So many directions my brain wants to go. What I want to, because I'm thinking about a lot of clients now who are dating or even who are in relationships that, and this might be two different questions, but often lead from their masculine, but want masculine. Like, they don't want to do that, but they're doing it because, like you said before, they don't, like, basically what I'm saying is, how do we get that ballroom dancing dynamic to happen without ballroom dancing? Like, what do they do?
Well, the thing is, fortunately or unfortunately, we all actually have to become whole first. So one of the things that happened for me was that after I was divorced, I dated like a woman unplugged, you know, like I lived in a small town, married to a farmer for 20 years, and I was now living downtown Toronto. And there was 4 million people out there. So I was dating a lot. It was a lot of fun. And then I kind of realized that this was a little bit like a drug. Like I was actually maybe going too far. I'd kind of sowed my wild oats and I decided to go celibate. And what I noticed, and actually also my daughter was part of this because she was 17 at the time. And she said to me, she said, Mom, you're like, there's you. And then there's like this shadow of a man beside you because you're so used to having a partner that it's like you're just waiting for someone to come along to fill it.
Wow.
It's almost like I'm pre-codependent.
Yeah.
Like I'm like waiting for that codependent relationship. And I thought, that's horrible that I actually have lost my inner masculine. So during my celibacy, I had this sense that there actually was a masculine and a feminine within me. And I decided to become my own best boyfriend. And I thought, okay, what am I really looking for in a partner? What is it? Like I say, I want someone who's masculine. Okay, what does that mean? And I started treating myself like I wanted a man to treat me. And what started happening is I became so happy. Crazy things started happening. Like literally, I was writing tantric intimacy at the time. So I'd be sitting in the libraries reading like all these cool tantric poems or whatever. And all of a sudden I would take this deep breath and I would have like a full body orgasm, like sitting in the library.
The quietest place.
Honestly. And I'm like, all of a sudden you stop and you're like, God, I hope I didn't make sound. Like it was like so hilarious, but my whole body became this lovely hum all the time. It was almost like, and it wasn't like weird orgasm guy thing. Like it wasn't like something weird. It was just this lovely feeling all the time. And then what happens is if a guy, when I started dating again, suddenly anyone else I was dating had to at least be as good as my inner boyfriend. Right? And if they weren't, we just weren't a good match. And I was okay with that. I wasn't going to pursue them. I wasn't going to do all those things because I only want someone who actually wants to be in the masculine. I don't want to train anybody. I don't want to convince anybody. And if you're not, that's cool because I am pretty damn complete right over here.
Yeah.
And that's a huge part because especially for people who want to be in the feminine and they want to be pursued and they want to have someone, if they keep coming up against people who are, kind of passive, burnt out, half dead, whatever, they're like, if our fear of being alone overrides us, we will just make the other person into whatever we want them to be.
Totally.
And we're not even meeting the person. We're not even seeing that this person does not want to be in the masculine.
Yeah. It's when you ignore those red flags, like I hear people all the time, oh, I saw them. I just went straight past them.
Right.
Yeah.
And so there's something, and again, this is where people often ask me, I can't study Tantra. Like, can I study Tantra if I don't have a partner? And honestly, it's the best time to study it because that's when we actually start to love our life. And then if we meet someone, we'd like to invite them into it. And if they don't fit, that's okay. Like we're not attached to it anymore, but we live in a world where we so believe in, and maybe we've experienced a lot of scarcity, especially in dating, that we're like, okay, I finally found someone. We both kind of like each other. The sex is okay. Okay, let's make this into what we want, as opposed to actually sitting there and saying, what do you really want? Do you desire this? And that's where even this masculine feminine thing, sometimes you have to explain it, right? Like when I was dating and you guys will say like, so what do you actually mean by masculine? It's like, I want you to initiate intimacy. I want you to bring me flowers. I want you to plan dinner and don't make me choose the restaurant. Like put some skin in the game, put some effort out. You can consider what I might like, but you do it. And there are people out there who are like that, male and female, depending on your orientation, who love that. They love planning. They love doing that. And there's others that just don't. Some are actually dead neutral. They're not really in the feminine or the masculine. They're just burnt out for some reason. Or maybe they don't desire romance. There are a lot of people in the world who they just want a companion. They actually just want a friend with benefits.
Yep.
And there's nothing wrong with that. They want someone to go to Cuba with, and they want someone that they can watch Netflix and a warm body in bed and someone to chat with over coffee.
Yep.
They don't want romance. They don't want this dynamic. And that's important to note, right? That, are you sure you even want romance? Well, right. It doesn't make the person bad. I remember dating one guy and he just wasn't in that place. He had been at the beginning, like kind of the first 6 months. He knew that's what I wanted. So that's what he did. Okay. Yeah. And he was like really, really good. And then slowly it started to taper off. And then at one point I got upset about it. And I was like, if you don't want to be in that role, just, no, I'll try harder. I can change. And I said, I don't want you to change. There's other people out there who will think you are perfect, exactly as you are. It's okay that we don't match. It doesn't make you wrong. It doesn't make anything. It just means that what I'm seeking isn't what you're seeking. And this is the other thing. We have this weird attachment still to that old idea of till death do you part. That if I'm in a relationship now, I have to make it work. And it's like, but what if this relationship was just for 6 months or 6 years? And then we learned what we needed to learn. We experienced what we needed to experience. And we simply, our paths diverge. And we go have another experience. It's like, we need to kind of know that in our hearts to always be conscious, because like, even this is why I left my husband, and he's a really good guy. Like, we're still friends. He's just a great guy. I hang out with his girlfriend. He's super nice, but we wanted different things in life. I wanted all this passion and kind of adventure and exploring something different and intimacy. And he just wanted to chillax, right? He just wanted to have a nice roast beef dinner and go out and have a cigarette. And like, he just wanted to relax. That's it. Like, it wasn't, he's a bad guy. It's just, wow, okay, well, we raised the kids and we ran the businesses, and now it's time to explore other kinds of romance, you know?
What about for people who are in relationships that don't want to leave and do want to give it where would they start where would one person start? Because say this quite often happens, right? The other person's not on board yet. And I'll just say the woman for this sake, like, where would she start to cultivate that? And I know it's within herself. I'm just thinking, like, practically, what can she do to invite that masculine in by becoming that oneness? Does that make sense?
Well, what I would do is, first, especially as a woman, she has to start being really honest with herself about how she feels and where she's at. Because especially if she's been in a relationship that hasn't been ideal, we tend to be quite optimistic, and we even convince ourselves that everything's okay. And we convince ourselves that, no, I really did want to have sex that time. And no, you know what? It's fine that he never gets me a birthday present. Birthdays are dumb, right? Like, who cares, right? And we've convinced ourselves of all these things. The start point, because the thing is, the masculine partner has to read the feminine partner. That's part of the game. If the feminine partner has been lying to herself or to him or himself, depending on whether we're just going with your heterosexual example, he can't read her anyway because she has no idea how she feels. So suddenly, let's say they have a conversation and it doesn't go well. They need to continue the conversation. They need to actually fix it. They can't just keep putting things under the carpet. And if it's not resolved, then she has to really sit with herself and say, what feels right to me right now? Do I feel okay crawling into bed with this guy, even though I'm furious? Because that's been our history. You just suck it up. You go to bed. You just, whatever. And that tortures a person to have to do that. So instead, she has to start actually, so that Shiva Shakti example I said, Shakti is our reality. Shakti is our emotions, our truth, where we actually are, what we feel. So for her to say to her partner, I'm really not okay with this conversation that we've had here. I want to resolve it. Maybe we can't right now, but I don't feel comfortable sleeping in the same bed with you until we resolve it. So I'm going to go sleep on the couch. I'm going to go sleep in the guest room. I know we'll resolve it one day, but I'm going to do this. It's not an ultimatum. It's not a threat, but she's simply honoring her truth, even if it's going to cause discomfort. Because what that does is it actually, first of all, gives the guy some credit that basically he can chew on this. He can be uncomfortable. And for him to rise in the masculine means he's the one that's going to fix it, not her. He's the one that's going to rise into the masculine. But he has to probably be a little uncomfortable, knowing that this probably is the beginning of the end if we don't solve this. So I'm just going to be honest with myself and I'm going to sleep here. And then maybe after a couple nights, he'd be like, okay, let's talk about it again. I've been thinking about it. Maybe it's this, maybe it's that. And when it's true, then she moves forward. But it's so important for people or women who want to be in the feminine to not do the heavy lifting for their partners. Because again, it's sort of that mother-child.
Not rescue out of those feelings, because that often happens.
Right? Because the thing is, if we want them to be in the masculine, then we have to treat them like they are capable of it.
Yes.
If we are fixing someone, first of all, it's insulting. It's so insulting. It's utterly emasculating. And you can't fix someone to become masculine by being masculine and forcing them into the feminine, right? If you want the masculine feminine, then be that quiet, straight, strong feminine. Let them be the one that runs circles. Let them be the one that sorts it out. It's the only chance. And if they don't, then they'll never come forth, right? But you can't get one thing by doing the opposite.
That's,
so
powerful. I want to end there because I hope everyone just rewind and listen to that over and over and over again, because that was a mic drop moment. That was phenomenal. Is there anything else? I'm sure there's a million other things, but is there anything else you would add that I haven't asked, or I don't know?
I think this particular point is really important. Like, what do you do when you're in a relationship and you want to start playing in this polarity, especially if you have history with it being flipped or nothing at all? Like maybe you've just really had no passion at all. The best thing you can do is just start the conversation, right? There's nothing worse than changing something and the other person doesn't even know you've opened a new book.
Yeah.
And whether you say, I heard this great podcast and I was, listening to this masculine feminine thing. And, Beck asked this question and I'm really thinking about it. Like, what would you think? Like, if I did that and I really want this because, I really want to be passionate with you. I want to live with you for the rest of my life. I want us to be making love when we're in our 90s. That's what I want. I wonder if there's something here for us, right? To really open it up in a very innocent way. And whether you, pick up my book or you read more about it or whatever, and you sort of say, okay, here's what I'm seeing. Here's what I'm reading. Here's what I'm understanding. What is that? How does that work for you? Like, have you experienced that? Like, just to have that conversation, because the one thing that I know about this masculine and feminine right now, and one of the reasons I'm really passionate about it, is I actually believe this is the growth edge of humanity, because we've come out of such a time of separation where even with the one we love the most, we don't share everything. We don't share our truths all the time. We try to coddle each other. And so then there's a wall between us. We do it with our children. We do it with our friends. We do it everywhere. But now, and I don't know whether it's just the consciousness of 2024 or what it is, the veils are dropping. Like, we're actually starting to realize, okay, you know what? I really do want more. And I want to be open and I want to find actual love. I want to feel love that nourishes me. I want to explore what else is there. And so this idea of healthy masculine feminine dynamics is new. So even if we have the start point, like even if all we do is play with even giving and receiving in touch, like I have an online course that's been running for 11 years called The Foundations of Tantric Intimacy. And the second week, you simply do a touch exercise where one person receives and the other person gives touch. And it could be massage, it could be the arms, it could be sexual, it could be whatever. But what a journey of learning to just receive for either partner. And then another journey to actually give in a way that your partner desires to receive. Like, everybody's learning this for the first time. And so for any couples out there to know, you're at the leading edge of this. There's no experts out there. Everybody's just figuring out. We're almost like we're taking this curious world that we've been living in and we're twisting it and we're doing something different. We're going to make something new here that deep down we all know is possible. And so I think there's a very gentle way to introduce it to people.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
So beautiful. Tell everyone how they can find you and all your magic and wisdom. And she's got this wonderful book, which I realized I was like, oh my God, I haven't bought that book. And I tried to, anyway, it's called Tales of the Tinderverse. Yeah. And along with many other wonderful books, this is, you have much more amazing books than that. But I just love the title of that. But tell everyone how they can find you and your work and consume you.
Yeah, no, my website is katrinabos.ca, and there you'll find all of my books, my courses. I have trainings. I even have trainings in the divine union of the masculine and feminine.
Beautiful.
We're in the middle of a facilitator training because that's part of it is I really want people to take this out into the world and share it with their men's groups, women's groups, retreats, everything. Like people are ready for this. They want that. But that will run again in the fall as well. But yeah, if you come to Katrina Bos, I've got a newsletter there that I send out every week. I'm also on YouTube. I have a huge YouTube. There's hundreds and hundreds of videos on YouTube that you'll find all kinds of these topics. And it's just called Katrina Bos.
Amazing. And all the links will be below. So, I don't feel like you have to remember all that if you're driving or anything. And they'll all be in the show notes. And thank you so much for coming on. That has been, again, we could have talked for 1,000,000 hours, and I'm going to have to get you back because it's just, I agree. There's just so much. I remember saying to you, like, this is the first time where I found a book that I'm like, oh, now I can get my hands into masculine and feminine, because it's actually so hard to find this content, which makes so much sense with what you just said at the end, that it's, it's so new, and that's exciting, guys. Like, that's exciting that we can be at that edge of it and no one is the expert and you can learn together as a couple. And yeah, it's beautiful. So thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom and magic. It's been such a pleasure.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I would love to come back.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome.